On July 29, 2024, President Joe Biden released a series of proposed Supreme Court reforms, mainly in response to frustration with the Supreme Court decisions in recent years that have included overturning Roe v. Wade, blocking the president's student loan forgiveness program, and limiting the discretion of federal agencies. The final straw was a July 1st ruling that former President Donald Trump was partially immune from prosecution for his alleged interference with the 2020 election. Supreme Court controversy, and even the idea of reforming the court to nullify its impact, is nothing new. In the wake of the court's striking down elements of his New Deal legislation, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt proposed packing the court, or adding justices that would vote with him. He argued, quote, "We have reached the point as a nation where we must take action to save the Constitution from the court, and the court from itself." The Supreme Court decisions of the 1960s and 70s, greatly expanding criminal defendants' rights and legalizing abortion, drew similar reactions from the other side of the aisle. Still, in this era of hyper-partisanship, we've seen possibly the most sustained campaign to limit the court's power in American history. The president's proposal contains three elements. The central proposal is to limit Supreme Court justice terms to 18 years. This would mean the immediate ends of the terms of conservative justices John Roberts, Clarence Thomas, and Samuel Alito, who have all been on the court for longer than that time. Article 3 of the Constitution gives all federal judges lifetime tenure. Given that, changing the Constitution requires 2/3 of both houses of Congress and 3/4 of the states to agree, and that would be all but impossible. So the workaround would be for the law to demote Supreme Court justices after 18 years to lower federal judgeships. The Constitution says federal judges get lifetime tenure, but it doesn't specify that they can't be reassigned to other federal courts. Theoretically, Congress could pass this legislation with a simple majority. Of course, the Supreme Court itself might be called on to decide whether this end run around Article 3 is itself unconstitutional. That would be a bizarre scenario indeed, with Supreme Court justices deciding whether they themselves can be effectively put out to pasture. The second proposal is a constitutional amendment to reverse the recent Supreme Court decision that granted immunity to former President Trump. Since that decision was constitutional in nature, this couldn't be done without a constitutional amendment. Since it's almost impossible that 2/3 of Congress and 3/4 of the states would agree to this, it's hard to say whether the proposal is serious or mere political posturing. Finally, the president proposes enforcing a code of ethics on the Supreme Court justices, such as requiring justices to disclose gifts, refrain from public political activity, and recuse themselves from cases in which they have certain conflicts of interest. Most of this already exists in the ethics rules for the Supreme Court and for judges in general, but the Biden proposal seeks to give the rules more teeth. Still, enforcement would ultimately be in the hands of the judiciary, making enforcement murky at best. Moreover, defining conflicts of interest at the Supreme Court level is exceedingly difficult, as all judges bring political priors to the bench that are often difficult to separate from the cases before them. Republicans have predictably reacted negatively to the proposals, with House Speaker Mike Johnson calling the proposals dead on arrival, prompting the president to bizarrely respond that Speaker Johnson himself was dead on arrival. On the other side, not all Democrats think the proposal goes far enough. Oregon Senator Ed Markey responded to the Biden proposal by proposing his own court-packing plan to add 4 justices to the U.S. Supreme Court, thereby allowing Biden to secure a liberal majority. This plan, too, is unlikely to go anywhere. Though short on realistic solutions, the issue of Supreme Court reform and limiting Supreme Court authority is sure to stay a hot political issue for years to come.